Well, it's official. The most infamous Zootopia comic is about to come to an end. Or at least I think it is. Unless DeviantArt user Borba has something really wild up their sleeve, there's literally nowhere else for this series to go. As I'm recording this video, there are 4 pages left. And I went through all 453 Zootopia-related deviations on Borba's profile to be sure that I didn't miss anything. I have made sure that I have everything in this series' canon summarized in my fun little script. Luckily for me, about half of these were the same comics done twice, one in English and one in Portuguese, as the author is from Brazil. But the first page of this now infamous 6-part series was titled I Will Survive, was published March 17th, 2017. This first part of 6 parts has 24 pages, and it is the most well-known part and has made a template for multiple memes and is most often referred to as the Zootopia abortion comic. Now, before I properly get into it, I have a few quick disclaimers. This video is not intended to be mean, especially not against the author of these comics. Do not send any hate to the author of these comics. I am not trying to be mean, and you should not be either. I am honestly giving it a what? Look at it. Nothing intended to be wrong, to be mean or anything. Next, if you try to comment anything that is anti-abortion in the comments below, I will roll my eyes and delete your comment. Reminder that the First Amendment in America protects you from the government, not from me. This is not censorship. Also, abortion is a human right. Moving on. But this first comic series is, in fact, about what it's nicknamed as. Judy and Nick have been dating, and Judy finds out that she's pregnant. She chooses not to keep the baby for multiple reasons, like her career, fear about what a fox-rabbit hybrid would be like, because a predator-prey hybrid has never happened before in this series' canon. And what I think most importantly is that the baby would be too big for her. Now, the creator of these comics has actually come out and said that if she were to go through with this pregnancy, she would have died. She would have died. It would have been too big for her. Now, this is actually a real thing with rabbits. I actually took a class in high school called Pre-Vet Small Animal, and we didn't really do much except take care of animals. Some of which were actually rabbits that were bred for meat. And we actually bred some of these rabbits in class. I'm being completely serious. Like, we did this for a part of our grade. We bred rabbits. And we were told that the male has to be smaller than the female rabbit for this female safety. Because if the male rabbit is larger, it will kill the female. The rabbit's babies will kill it if it's too big. Nick, on the other hand, takes an anti-abortion stand. I know they prefer to be called pro-life, but I'm not going to be giving them that respect. He talks about how some people make a difference in the world and asks, what if you had been aborted? and all that typical rhetoric. It's worth noting that while his choice may seem like the author is anti-abortion, they have actually said they are not, and they wanted to share both sides in a sense. But the end of this comic really comes when Judy slaps Nick in a fit of anger. He packs up his things and leaves with the statement, "I will survive," which leaves Judy heartbroken, but not for all that long. Now, there is a modified and abridged version that is just a single page called Whatever. And I think it's kind of funny. It just shows the two of them, Nick and Judy, sitting on a couch, both on different electronic devices. Judy says that she is pregnant and doesn't want the child. Nick looks up, pauses a beat, and simply responds, "Whatever," because it's not his decision anyway, and was how the first comic should have gone anyway, in the sense of opinions. But it wouldn't have been as wild. It wouldn't have been as widely known if that were the original ending. So, of course, I understand. This, I really do think that the part of the reason that this series is the way that it is for the sake of causing a reaction, is the best way I can put it. Causing a reaction. Now, I'm not saying that's necessary. That may not necessarily be the reason. That is what I sort of take away from it. But that's okay. Then we're going to move on to part 2, which is called Born to Be Alive. Which, like, kind of, not to be mean, but I think that's kind of a stupid title. This part takes place a year later at 4 a.m. Nick shows up at Judy's apartment, begging her to let him in, and even lying, saying that he might not live much longer. He might not have another day to live. He asks if Judy got the abortion, which she did, and there's actually this really beautifully rendered panel of it. Like, the author is a legitimately good artist, and they're using their powers for this. Which, I can't say they're using their powers for evil, but they're using their powers for chaos. It turns out that the reason he showed up was to ask Judy if they could get back together, and he asks for her forgiveness. Despite the fact that Nick left her when she, quote, needed him most, she mentions how the procedure had actually gone wrong and she needed support and ended up in the hospital with having to do tests and procedures and whatnot. But she does forgive him. But, like, she forgives him for being a coward, which was honestly so cool. Nick starts yelling and manhandling Judy, which awakens Shay, Judy's new girlfriend. Nick acts mildly homophobic, which, honestly, I kind of expected. Grabs Judy, and when Shay tries to interfere, he pushes her down. Judy rushes to Shay and yells at Nick to get out of her house. And he leaves. And honestly, I'm happy for Judy in this one. Good for her. Good for her, honestly. Taking charge of her life like that, moving on, becoming a lesbian. Ah, love that shit. The next part to be released is a prequel and is called An Afternoon at the Mall. You'll never guess that it's an afternoon at the mall. It takes place before a proper romantic relationship between Nick and Judy, in which they spend an afternoon together. After they accidentally brush noses, some bigots are like, "What the hell?" And Judy goes all up in arms. The pair discuss their feelings, and Nick announces that he's joined the police academy. This one is not as painstakingly rendered. It's very sketchy. Still, honestly, looks good. Like, for a sketch, it's obviously done much quicker than the rest of the series, but it's still like solid work. And this also doesn't have the twists and turns that the other parts do, so I'm just gonna kind of gloss over it. Like, if you would like to read it, I'm actually going to be putting a link to the first page of every single part in my description. The next part to be released is another prequel. This one is specifically a prequel to the second part, Born to Be Alive. So it's like part 1.5, technically. And it's called The Longest Night. This one's actually only, oh my god, I hate this word. Tangentially. This one's only tangentially related. But the description says it is a prequel. It takes place only hours before the events of Born to Be Alive, where we see two young ladies of the oldest profession. They are a polar bear and an Arctic fox. They stand on a street corner waiting for clients. Both of these young ladies are struggling financially, and because a mob boss that was in the Zootopia movie, his granddaughter is now the goddaughter of Judy Hopps, a cop, and sort of like it's more frowned upon than it was before, and like this mob boss isn't helping. I don't remember the Zootopia movie all that well. But anyways, Nick Wilde, the fox, ends up being a client, although I think it's really interesting to note that we never actually see his face in this series. And afterwards, Nick leaves to go see Judy and leaves a very large tip to this lovely Arctic fox, which actually allows her to pay off debts and get groceries for herself and her young daughter. And the ending is honestly really sweet. I'm like happy for them, honestly. The final part of this whole fiasco is technically divided into two parts. Never Say Goodbye and Never Say Goodbye Extra. Both of these parts take place on the same day, 10 years after Born to Be Alive. Judy is now the mayor of Zootopia, and Nick is the leader of a Junior Ranger Scouts troop and the owner of a theme park. Both of them are married and have children. Judy to Shay, I never mentioned her girlfriend is a fox, a different fox. Judy to Shay from the second part with two adopted children, a zebra and a red panda, which I will say I think kind of an odd choice in names for them, Rafiki and Mulan, which like technically are from they are from the areas that a zebra and a red panda would be from, but I feel like it's kind of cop-out, personally. But like, maybe that's just me being nitpicky. And Nick is married to an unnamed woman with a son, Nicholas Jr. There is a brief mention of politics, specifically a small group of radicals that are very upset with Judy becoming the mayor and her platform of equality. Keep that in mind. But the section is mostly Judy and Nick forgiving one another and deciding to go back to being friends and staying in touch. Now, the extra section of Never Say Goodbye is where the wild stuff we came for in the first two parts returns. This part has a mere 8 pages, with only 4 being released as of right now. It starts with a parade, pretty simple. We go back to it being rendered in black and white, as the first 2 parts were. The first part of Never Say Goodbye was rendered in color, and the first 2 parts of the series were rendered in black and white. So we go back to that. It starts with a parade, pretty simple. And then Mayor Judy Hopps gets JFK'd. She gets John F. Kennedy'd. And it's gruesome. Like, it is sort of cartoony in a sense, but it's really wild with everything but the blood being rendered in black and white and the blood being this bright red and these massive splatters. It is a startling scene, and I am so excited to see what the rest of the series is going to be. But the question now remains, why? I'll be honest and say that this was not nearly as bad to go through as my fanfiction iceberg, which I will put a link. But this was weird. Like, I remember seeing Zootopia in theaters. Do I remember much about it? No. I just remember that I saw it. Zootopia is not something I expected to see a fan base still going years later. Especially not a fan base that creates stuff like this. And part of me thinks that, like I said earlier, this series was to create chaos, to be chaotic, to get a reaction from people. And this extra part was added to finally surpass the insanity of I Will Survive. Now, I don't know the truth. I really just wanted to summarize all of the parts and be like, hey, this is a thing. I'm not upset by it in the same way that I was upset with some of the previous things that I read, but I am stunned by it. I'm stunned by it. Like, I don't know what there is to really say, just the fact that this exists and it's done by someone that's a really good artist. You know what? I'm going to end this with a couple of my favorite memes that came from this. So, thank you all so much for watching, especially if you've gotten all the way to the end. That'll be all from me for today. I hope you have a great day. I leave you some memes. Bye-bye.